Developed by Infogrames and published by Infogrames in the EU and iMotion and Interplay in 1992 for MS-DOS, macOS, 3DO, and other platforms, Alone in the Dark is a survival horror game revolving around one of two protagonists exploring and trying to escape a haunted mansion. The game was conceptualized and directed by programmer Frédéric Reynal, who worked alongside Didier Chanfray to create a 3D engine for the game. Due to technical limitations of the time, the team created an engine in which 3D characters and objects would interact with two-dimensional backgrounds to give the illusion of a fully 3D environment. In order for this to be possible, the camera angles would all have to be fixed. The rooms and halls of the mansion, as well as the angles of each camera shot, were all created using hand-drawn bitmap images. The fixed camera angles also created a sense of fear and anxiety in the player, as this would limit the player's view and cause uncertainty with each new room entered. As I've said before, I believe it's the things you can't see that truly make for a strong horror experience, and this game showcases a perfect understanding of that very concept. Cinematic appearances aside, all horror enthusiasts know that a major part of what usually makes a game or movie scary is the way its sound and music are implemented. Luckily, composer Philippe Vache understood this assignment and would incorporate a setup where music would typically play whenever a monster was on screen, and sometimes even without, further adding to that sense of fear. He would also incorporate multiple sound effects like glass shattering and monster grunting and screeches. The story is set in Louisiana, 1924, following the journey of two playable characters, Emily Hartwood and Edward Carnby. It is revealed that Jeremy Hartwood, owner of the Derceto mansion, has committed suicide under suspicious circumstances. Emily, Jeremy's niece, believes that the piano up in his attic may contain a clue, as she recalls Jeremy mentioning its significance when they were younger. Edward is a private investigator who is sent out to go find and examine the same piano in the attic for an antique dealer. From this point forward, all of the major gameplay and events happen for both characters in the same way. The character automatically enters the mansion and makes their way up the stairs into the attic, where the player assumes control. From there, if the player examines behind the piano, they see a note left by Jeremy, confirming that his suicide was the result of him trying to escape an even worse fate, set by some unknown and mysterious force. This sets the tone for the rest of the game, where the characters have to fight their way out of the mansion by solving puzzles and avoiding or defeating multiple types of creatures in the process. The game's controls utilize what we now know as the tank control method. This means that your character will turn left and right with the left and right arrow keys, forward regardless of what direction you are facing with the up arrow, and backwards with the down arrow. You can also run by double tapping the up arrow key for faster movement, or to get around or away from other creatures when they're gaining on you. The characters also have additional functions in order to interact with or examine other objects. After standing in front of the desired object, the player can go to the main menu and select options like examining the object or even pushing it if the game calls for it, all followed by holding down the space button to perform the action. You also gain a jump function in the later parts of the game. Aside from this, many of your interactions will revolve around items and weapons that you pick up and try to use effectively. Each weapon tends to work differently from the last. To use a sword, for example, you're required to equip it, hold down the spacebar to create the fight stance, and use 3 of the arrow keys to determine what direction you'll attack from, and the type of attacks you'll want to perform. This is similar for the game's firearms, where you're required to equip the weapon, hold down the spacebar to get into a stance to aim, and, like before, press one of the arrow keys to determine the type of shot you'll be firing. A big part of the Alone in the Dark experience, aside from fighting off scary monsters, is to find various key items and books or letters to help you solve the many puzzles of the mansion. The books and letters typically provide hints about how to solve certain puzzles, as well as provide additional bits of backstory and lore. They become vital to not only surviving the mansion, but understanding how the evil came to actually take hold over this place, and how to stop it. One major factor to the gameplay is also knowing when to drop or give up on certain items as well. Yes, just like the games it would go on to inspire, like Resident Evil, your inventory in Alone in the Dark is in fact limited. After a certain point, when you want to pick up more items, you'll need to remember to drop or throw the ones you don't need away, in order to clear out the inventory for more. They can be picked up again later, thankfully. This way, you don't have to worry about any items you pick up being permanently gone afterward. While not the most efficient item management system out there, it works, and prevents you from having to restart from the beginning due to any inventory mistakes and so forth. Surviving the experience is simply a case of trial and error. Things will kill you, and often without any warning or clear reason behind them. This is part of the fun of the game, as you're technically given alternate endings, showcasing what happens to you after dying, and the actual death animations can be quite strange and creative. Thankfully, the game allows you to save anywhere at any time. While it can be frustrating to have to save often, it at least ensures you won't fall too far behind after learning about what will cause your demise up ahead. While it is all technically manageable, it can become a little cumbersome as well. While a lot of puzzles do contain hints about them throughout the mentions texts and other visual cues, some of them can be quite difficult or confusing. That's not to say it isn't doable, as you will eventually come to most solutions just by experimenting, even if you don't necessarily know what you're doing, but that the answers won't always be so clear either. The secret passage in the library, for example, was easy enough to locate, but very difficult to position myself to correctly to open it, especially while trying to maintain a lantern light and avoid a creature trying to attack me. It's absolutely true that being influential does not always mean that a game will feel as fun or playable in the modern era, and this one certainly has its own share of issues that bog it down. For one, the controls are extremely sluggish and can feel unresponsive sometimes, especially when you're trying to get them to run. This is extra difficult if you're not used to tank controls, let alone enjoy them. The combat is also very clunky, with the mechanics and the aiming methods feeling a little loose, requiring some trial and error to get the hang of. And of course there's the fact that fixed camera angles, while usually looking great, can be a real nightmare to maneuver around, such as this jumping sequence, which is extremely difficult to get right due to how zoomed out you are. The graphics, while clearly a breakthrough at the time the game was first released, can be a bit of an eyesore now, especially when looking at the original character models. Thankfully, the 2D and hand-drawn environments still have a distinct style to them that give off just the right amount of personality for this type of atmosphere. With all of these hiccups on top of the sometimes confusing puzzle structure, is the game still worth checking out in modern day? Yes, I absolutely believe it is. It's important to think about and remember just what made this game so influential in the first place. While mostly told through a bunch of books and notes, I found the lore in the game to be absolutely compelling and worthy of its own novelization if the chance ever comes. It combines elements of multiple famous writers and directors, such as H.P. Lovecraft, George A. Romero, Edgar Allan Poe, and others, bringing about a creepy tale with just the right amount of dread and suspense. This game is called Alone in the Dark, and you will absolutely feel that level of loneliness that such a title gives off. The cinematic nature of the game is also a triumph, and segments of it still hold up surprisingly well. One of the game's scariest moments involves a creature bursting through the window to attack you. This shot is a perfect mix of both a disorienting camera angle change and an excellent use of sound design to bring out the full scary effect. It would later be mimicked in the original Resident Evil, when a dog also comes bursting through a window at you unexpectedly. Even the implications behind this death screen were off the charts. While the game in general may not seem as scary as it once did in the early 90s, I believe certain moments like that one still managed to keep their scare factor intact. With all of these features and the relatively short time it takes to play, I believe this game is still worth checking out. The outdated graphics, fixed camera angles, clunky movement, and difficult puzzles are a small price to pay for one of the earliest examples of a truly great survival horror experience, especially in a 3D environment. If you can suck in all of the lore and just let your imagination take hold a little bit, then I believe you'll feel the same way, and see just what it was that took hold of Shinji Mikami, Keiichiro Toyama, and others to create the survival horror experiences we've come to love since. And that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you played this game before yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're feeling generous, please consider supporting my Patreon, where awesome people like Brandon, CLO, Erica, and Jedi Dude all help to keep this channel going. Happy Halloween, my friends. Until next time.